So next, we're going to move on to our next session, which is a panel discussion. And this panel is going to explore the ever-present question of how to deliver business value from data and analytics. As before, there will be an audience Q&A towards the end of the session. So again, submit those questions, get those in. The title for the panel is Prepare for Impact, Delivering Business Value from Data and Analytics. We're really pleased to have IBM supporting this discussion, and it will be moderated by Chris Zobler, who is Director for Watson AI Applications within IBM Data and AI. So I'll now hand over to Chris to kick things off with the panel. Chris.
Great, team. Thank you so much for joining today and certainly for having me be a part of today's discussion. So we want to thank everyone for taking the time to tune in to the Corinium Data Champions online session. And as was just iterated, this panel in particular, Prepare for Impact and Delivering Business Value from Data Analytics, is going to focus specifically on how data and analytics leaders can drive meaningful impact within their enterprise. And I think just as importantly, how to embed data and analytics into the core strategy of their businesses. We have an incredible panel of experts from across the banking and financial markets industry that are ready to share their experiences. And with that, maybe we can do a quick round of introductions and then we can dive into the content. My name is Chris Zobler. As was stated before, I'm the Director of Sales for our Watson AI Applications business at IBM. I've had 20 plus years in the data and analytics business, ranging in financial services specifically from everything with respect to data governance, to data warehousing, and then in the last 6 years, transitioned over to data science and ultimately into our AI practice. So I appreciate the time today. And with that, Ursula, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, you can. Okay, good.
Yes.
So good. I'm Ursula Catone, and I am the Chief Data and Architecture Officer for Huntington Bank in Columbus, Ohio. And I've been in the Chief Data Officer role. This is my third bank, and let's see, I've been in it about 8 years now, since 2012.
Fantastic. Todd?
Yes, hello. I'm Todd James. I'm a Senior Vice President of Intelligent Automation at Fidelity Investments. I've been in this role probably about 2 months now. Prior to that, I built and ran data and analytics for our workplace investing business unit. I've been at Fidelity for about 14 years and had roles across operations, strategy, as well as data and analytics. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Todd. Sanjay.
Sanjay Saxena with Northern Trust. I am the Senior Vice President for Enterprise Data Governance and Strategy. I've been in this current role for over 4 years, and prior to that, I've been in senior data management roles for over 15 years in financial services.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sanjay. And last but not least, Joe.
It's Joe Washington, PNC Financial Services, Senior Vice President, working in an internal risk, I should say, independent risk management group. I've been with PNC for about 16 years in various fashions, from the first, second, as well as third line of defense. Prior to that, just extensive experience in refining and marketing, chemical distribution, and manufacturing. So spent pretty much the majority of my career either in technology or managing technology businesses within either financial services or refining and marketing and chemical distribution.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joe. I must say, after reviewing all the resumes and getting to know the panelists a little bit, overwhelming the amount of experience and expertise that this panel is bringing to the table. So I think what would be very helpful as a way to kick off the conversation is really sharing a bit around your experience around how data and analytics executives can actually leverage data to have a meaningful impact on the wider organization, and how best to communicate those successes across the broader enterprise. Because as we've all seen, we're certainly not lacking data. We're actually accelerating the need as we move into these process automation use cases, machine learning and AI use cases. The desire and need for data continues to expand. But how are we actually doing this when the rubber meets the road? Joe, maybe we can start with you.
All right, that'll be great. Thanks. Well, what I've done and what I've seen done in the past are a couple of things, and I'll just kind of hit a few things, and then we'll let the rest of the panel, add the experiences as well. But you have to be able to gain a greater perspective of the business, and in order to do that, you have to understand where the levers are and where the pain points are, and using data and analytics to help refine where those points are makes a huge difference. I know in the past when I didn't have as much of this technology at my fingertips, it was just tougher to really understand where my business was, or the business that I was trying to support, where it was, because even though we had tranches of data and large spaces of data, just didn't have the tools that were there to support it in a way that, from a business perspective, if I was on the technology side and doing some of the technology things, I could probably have run some of the true, I would say, data analytical tools, but not from a business perspective, but more from a technologist perspective, in order to be able to crack some of the data. But at least having tools that are business oriented for the business folks, and now that have come out within the past 6 or 7, maybe 8 years, have really accelerated that opportunity for us. Secondly, to help with executives kind of leverage, I think you need to move some of the technical teams around, we'll say, a little bit. Move some of the folks that are truly technologists into the business, and some of the business folks, if they can, into the technology space. And why I say that is because it will give your broader enterprise a greater understanding, as well as an opportunity to be able to shift when you need to make shifts within your business. And so having that opportunity to be multi-threaded, if you want to call it that, to understand from a different perspective someone else's view, will just give someone a broader understanding of what the business is all about. And lastly, is really using more innovation and more analytical tools and innovative tools for artificial intelligence, as well as deep learning, to be able to really find where we have the hidden spots within the data. So many cases we have the data set, as you spoke of, we have the data set, but it's just so massive, we just don't know where those nuggets are buried. And sometimes they're right in plain view, but we just can't see them because it's just too much noise around the data itself. So particularly with unstructured data, we need to find a way, and we're working on trying to find a way to use tools that are really on that bleeding edge right now to help us move this continuum forward and move this conversation forward. So that's what some of the things that we're doing.
Great, Joe. I think everyone on the panel would agree that that perspective, especially around moving resources around the enterprise where business acumen starts to meet technology capability, certainly helps us all accelerate adoption. Sanjay, if we could get your perspective on how best to leverage data across the enterprise.
So I would add to some of the things that have already been said, but provide a different perspective. So one of the major themes in my organization is around self-service, and I've been pushing for self-service extensively. I think there is when we as data executives think about solving issues, business issues, we think about traditionally IT coming in, helping, or our teams coming in and doing things. But we always forget that sometimes the frontline associate, the business analysts, etc., have a huge amount of business perspective, and only if you can train them on data and on some of the tools, which are becoming more and more pervasive and easier to use, we can really enable or free up the organization to do a lot of regular data analytics, data mining, etc. So I believe that that's one aspect that is important for me. The second is closer to my role and my job, which is in strategy and governance. Clearly understanding organizations' data and its silos, and being able to provide the right strategies to senior executives to be able to solve those problems is really, really essential. So that enterprise view, especially in bigger financial services firms where there are multiple line of businesses, where there are so many silos and so many issues, where people perhaps in the silos are trying to solve the same problem, and getting to truly enterprise solutions is really the key to solving the data issues. So a lot of focus on enterprise MDM, enterprise data management, data lakes, but fundamentally an enterprise cross-functional view of all of data issues in the organization is a really a key skill to have for individuals in my job, and a key capability to build within organizations.
Yeah, I think in the 2 decades that I've certainly been doing this, we've spoken about self-service a lot, and it looks great on the PowerPoint slide, but putting it into practice is as much a behavioral change as it is a selection of tools for adoption. So congratulations to you and the team for what you're clearly being able to drive. Todd, your perspective on success leveraging data?
Certainly, and it's actually exciting to build on what's already being said. I see some common themes. What I'll say though is I'm looking forward. I do think as we're looking to drive value with the business, we're hitting a moving target. So a few years ago, it was about getting out there and demonstrating some use cases to show value, and depending on where your organization is, that's still important. But I think, to really be able to compete on analytics, this is about evolving. This is about finding those places where you have sufficient volumes of data and you have an opportunity to augment or replace human judgment with machine prediction. It's about being able to enable new business models. So, the way that I've seen it over the past few years is shifting from individual point solutions and use cases to systems of models to new business models is where we're looking to get our competitive advantage. To do that, one of the things that I think we've talked about is you've got to look at your own team, but I want to take just a minute to talk about, you've got to look at the business. It's very important that we bring them along. So having structured approach to engage, educate, and inform. So, within Fidelity, we took senior leaders off site, had them educated by leading professors from universities. And what we're trying to do is get them to understand what a good use case is, starting to think about how their business can be transformed. And we've backed that at every level of the organization with having 3,000 people participate in an AI day, looking at recurring ongoing communications, training every other Tuesday to be able to get people an understanding of the application of AI and analytics. So I do think there's a lot of mechanisms that need to be put in place, not just for our teams, but to bring the business along if we really want to drive value.
Fantastic. I couldn't agree more. And Ursula, can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Perfect. So same question to you. How are you successfully leveraging data within your organization?
Yeah, so we're still a pretty new program from a journey standpoint, early days on the work that we're doing. So it's been a little bit harder, right, to go from a standing start to really starting to share why the data we're doing is important, what the work is, and how to keep people informed about it. So I'd highlight 2 things that I feel like we've been successful to try and help the organization understand. To the education side of it, we built out a roadmap, and since then, every 6 months, I've been sharing that roadmap with a group of folks. I call them stakeholders, but it's about 500 people that get invited to roadmap review meetings. So we talk about where we are on the journey, what's been accomplished, and what's coming next, so that folks are not surprised by what work's going on, and if they want to have input into it, have the ability then to influence what's coming next. So that has been a pretty big success for us in helping identify for folks what it is that we're doing and how we're moving that forward, and then the benefits that they're getting from it. In a more small group fashion, we've created a thing called the data challenges list. So people think very focused on data quality issues a lot of times, and instead this is about the challenges and pain points that folks are feeling within their respective business areas. And so we started out collecting a list of those challenges. And as you can imagine, the challenges went from very small, like I need this data element on a report and I don't know how to get it there, to extremely large, which was, we really could use a data dictionary for the bank. And so as a result, that list, though, helps inform both the roadmap as well as our ability to deliver quick wins for the organization while we work on bigger things. I use the analogy of renovating a house. Many folks have renovated homes before, and you know that there's some yucky, expensive work that lingers in the basement, whether new electrical or new plumbing or waterproofing or new roof, right? Stuff that nobody wants to spend money on, but your house isn't going to be any good for you if you don't actually do that work. But the businesses don't get any real benefit from it out of the gate. It's the stuff on your main floors where you're putting in new carpet or hardwood or a new kitchen, a jetted tub, a sub-zero refrigerator. None of those things can happen if you haven't done that basement work. So we try and balance out the two, which is how do we deliver some of those quick wins that the businesses will appreciate and get value from quite quickly, while simultaneously spending the bigger chunks of dollars on stabilizing our foundation for the future.
You're making me feel guilty as I broadcast from my basement because I'm literally surrounded by some of those yucky things that I probably need to address in the short term. But no, a great perspective. And I think as technologists, we always have looked at new capabilities as a way to bring into our organizations to help fix some fundamental challenges, hopefully go beyond the yucky things, but then translating technology capability into value creation. So spanning back across the aisle on the business side for not just the minutes and hours and people cost savings, but ultimately, what is the value that we bring to a broader organization that we can now create once we actually have adopted some of these new capabilities? So maybe, Ursula, we can stick with you on expanding how you've been successful at being able to deliver and really explain value creation and generation as you bring technology into your organization.
Yeah, so we focused right out of the gate our strategy and roadmap on 4 primary business outcomes. First one being improving our customer experience. It is one of the most important things from an organization that we have collectively been focused on, and so that's number 1 for us. 2 is helping drive or grow revenues while maintaining the revenues that we have. 3rd would be expense reduction, anywhere we can actually get some savings, make people more efficient, so not just hard dollar savings, but actually drive efficiency in the organization. And 4th, around mitigating and reducing risk. So it's always a part of any data organization has some lever around risk. But we have primarily focused in working our way through those items in that order. So we articulate the things that we deliver against those 4 outcomes. So it keeps people very focused on those specific things, how we're delivering it, our business cases. We talk about those 4 levers, outcomes. As we deliver individual accomplishments, we still focus on that. So much of our communication then stems around that initial setting of those outcomes. And our senior leadership team, so CEO and his directs, actually helped put those in the order that I listed them off, in the order of priority from a company perspective. So focusing on customer experience first and foremost. And that really helps drive the work that we do and helps prioritize the work we do.
Excellent. Sanjay, any additional comments there around value generation and really what it looks like in practice for you and your team?
Yeah, so I would say that, like Ursula, we have similar sort of business objectives that my team and my organization aligns to in terms of our goals and our roadmaps, etc. I think I would like to focus a little bit on the actual implementation of these themes, provide a couple of examples perhaps of unique things that we have done in our enterprise. And a lot of my focus has been on operational data management. a lot of the work that we do in asset management and servicing is basically we take data from our customers, we process it, we do a lot of back office processing, and we give it back to our customers. So we end up in very traditional sense enriching the data, doing a lot of computations on it, and we are sort of the custodians for that for those customers. So in that whole operational pipeline, and I'm giving you a very significant example of some of the things that we've done, there are lots of inefficiencies from a business perspective. There's a lot of data quality checks that are happening all the way across that whole assembly line. And my team has worked effectively with the businesses to create initiatives to improve that operational effectiveness. For example, to improve straight-through processing for our fund accounting group, right? So that they can process and they can get to the same outcomes without using really expensive resources to check security prices and quantities and things like that multiple times. So basically embedding ourselves with the business teams, creating value-added initiatives and executing on those gives our executives a first-hand feel of what a data organization can do. So we've done a few of those things aligned to different priorities within the organization.
Great, thank you, Sanjay. And I think historically, I think we've all seen the spaghetti string model where we start to look at the data pipelines and actually what it takes to build data assets of value. And ultimately, it's that concept of the yucky data look of how our organizations have been built and the silos traditionally that our businesses have been built on. So one of the questions actually that's popped up here live in the question and answer, and team that's joined us today, please submit some questions after the next question here. We'll certainly take some live questions, but we thought this one might be an interesting one to address. Todd, maybe for you, what is the yuckiest data challenge that you faced to date that you've had to address within the organization?
You know, I think when you start, most of them are yucky, even if you feel like your data is in pretty good shape. I remember starting the journey and saying, you know, we've had good data practices to keep us out of trouble. And in a transactional environment, that was very good. Then you want to start to exploit it for data and algorithms. That gets a lot tougher. I think one of the toughest ones that we're facing right now is we're really trying to do a lot with unstructured data. And that's tough for several reasons. The variability is high. The advancement of the algorithms are evolving pretty rapidly. If you read a paper that's a year old, you might as well be reading a paper that's from the 70s. And so it's a very rapidly evolving field. So that's something we're working through now. We're getting some good successes, but if you would have asked me a few months ago, I would have talked to you about PII and some of the other data that we have to work with. But the hardest thing that we're dealing with is unstructured data in an environment where it's not just the language, it's also a checkbox. It's not a radio dial. They're in different places, and we have a wide degree of variance in trying to extract information from documents. I'll also say, I think it's also probably one of our biggest, highest impact use cases as we're able to figure it out as well. So with the pain comes the glory, I guess.
Yeah, and as these new technologies and techniques evolve, I think having trust and transparency in a lot of those models now, this concept of ethical AI certainly will become prevalent in everything that we do moving forward, especially in highly regulated industries such as financial services and banking. So certainly resonating well with me. And Joe, maybe over to you. Some of the yucky data stories that you have, the scars that we all carry. Anything you'd like to share?
Well, I think Todd really hit on it. That was one of the largest ones, biggest ones that I'm faced with. But excuse me. But also, as I now get into the RPA space, Todd really didn't speak about RPA per se, but some of the things that the architectures or the techniques also fall into that space, because, you know, is a checkbox in the same space, or is this in this type of space? So see you smile around that, and it makes it very challenging when you think you have all the structured stuff right, and then when you get into just a few of the small unstructured things, it can just make your project go into spaces you never had anticipated. So particularly over the past in 2019, I took on this the challenge to really, for my department and really for all of independent risk management, to look more into RPA, and I thought it would be kind of snap your fingers and it'll kind of work again, because our organization had the structure pretty much set. I had to really go through, find a team, build a team, and then start working it through. But picking the right projects, that was a challenge because I just didn't know what I didn't know. And when you don't do that, you spend a lot of time creating and then recreating and then engineering and re-engineering just in order to gain that perspective. Even when you do at times have contractors that come in to maybe support some of the things maybe that worked in one institution for them doesn't work for you just because of some of that spaghetti data that you call it, or spaghetti infrastructure. It just is different. So yeah, that's one of the yucky things that I think I like to throw to the table.
Excellent. One of the common themes that I'm starting to hear as we go through this dialogue has been the engagement of the business as well. So we talk about outcomes, we talk about the way that we articulate value generation. But I think one of the areas that many of the clients I've worked with over the 2 decades that I've been engaged in this part of this business has really been around driving a strategy from a technology perspective that aligns with the business strategy. So hand in hand, how do we do this together? And what are some of the best practices for actually engaging the business in this data-driven culture that we're all trying to build? So Ursula, maybe I can ask you to share a little bit there on driving that strategy together, and what best practices have you seen put into use that have helped you along your path?
Yeah, so the biggest item for me, especially having gotten to be the first CDO at 2 other banks prior to this, lots of live and learn as a result of that, and things to do to help engage the business earlier in the process. And so right up front, as I was getting the strategy approved by our executive leadership team, I also asked each of them to dedicate, and not meaning full-time, but give a resource that I would call a business data and insights officer to represent the data needs of their organization and help me navigate their organization as a result of that relationship with them. They would be on my governance committee. They would be a part of an advisory committee, and really help me better understand the business strategy, make sure that the work that we're doing is linked to their strategy. So I get all the strategy documents and go through those. But those resources were by far the most important component of helping get some lift on the strategy and our roadmap and the work that we're doing, because I've constantly got to tie back to a resource from each of our executive team leaders. So the CEO's direct reports, I have a representative from each of those, plus some additional ones where I needed some additional depth. So for example, fraud, or our mergers and acquisitions team, right? Places that would have a different type of data impact that might roll up under one of those organizations. We pulled that out, and I have a representative for each of those as well. So that I have found to be probably the most impactful in trying to make sure that the business is engaged.
Excellent. That's a great piece of wisdom to share. Sanjay, if we could ask you the same question on aligning technology and business strategy and really those best practices of bringing the business along so we can all be successful.
So I have a data governance committee, which is a representative of, which has representation from very senior level people within the bank across all of the business units. And I've included some technology partners as well, like architecture is there, analytics is part of that committee as well. So that is a place where everyone comes together. We manage those agendas very, very in a great deal of detail. the topics that get discussed are truly of enterprise nature. And the whole objective there is to engage with the businesses and make them part of the solution. So that is at the highest level. Then below that, we have a very extensive extensive operating model where we have data stewards in the businesses. We have data owners. So we are setting up a data owner network to make sure that, and we go down to a great deal of detail in terms of roles, responsibilities, and RACI diagrams and stuff like that, where we clearly assign accountability and ownership for different data issues. So a lot of my time in the last 4 years has gone in establishing that whole ecosystem. It is a very complex ecosystem across 6 different units within the bank. And finally, after 3 or 4 years of struggling with it, we've got it to work. We are at a point where everybody's participating, they're actively engaged in these things. So those are the 2 components from an operating model that are important. The third piece of the puzzle has been the establishment of data standards and an enterprise data policy. And that has also been very challenging in that people have, it is very hard for 6 units to agree on an overall policy that they will have to adhere to and they might be audited against. So after several years of effort, we've been able to establish a set of standards and an overarching policy, which now everybody has to adhere to. And, that's the bit of the stick side of things where, audit can look at it and they can ask programs to adhere to those standards, etc. So basically, in summary, what I'm saying is that you have to build this whole ecosystem of data consumers, data owners, data stewards, and senior data executives in the firm, and have them be aligned behind your agenda, behind your strategy. And easier said than done. It has taken me 4+ years and I'm still not done with it, but it is definitely the way organizations should be going in terms of engaging with the business.
Yeah, certainly top-down support as we look to make major changes, both from an outcomes perspective, but also, again, back to the behavioral changes that come with adoption of technology to drive this sort of agenda is critical. So a great example, and I don't know that we'll ever be done, because soon enough there'll be something else that we're going to have to build towards. Hey,
Absolutely.
Todd,
if I can just quickly, it's a very difficult challenge for executives, and it's an even harder challenge for business executives to understand the value that all of this brings. So it takes a lot of effort on both sides to come together and make something like this happen.
Yeah, one of the areas that we certainly see, especially as these newer capabilities and techniques start to emerge, is really a question around skills. So even when we start to make the decisions on this is a challenge that we're going to tackle, that we have the business buy-in, what are some of the challenges, Todd? Maybe we can turn this over to you from a skills perspective within the organization. Even if we agree that we're going in a specific decision, what's your approach on making sure that you have those skills to actually arrive, and some of the best practices that you can share with the team?
Yeah, I think one of the things you want to do early on is clearly you want to look at the skills in your organization. So within the data and analytics space, and I'll talk about that. But I also think spend time with your head of HR and look at the digital and analytical skills within your marketing people, your operations people, and your product people. For them to be able to consume the services you have, having some base level of understanding of the capabilities, some baseline digital skills is going to be very important. So we spend a lot of time there. I think the best practices for skills, and what I would say is, where we ended up spending a lot of our time, we had a pretty good idea for the analytic and the data capabilities that we needed. Like everyone else, there's some specialized skills that you have to go out on the market and compete pretty aggressively for, and that can be tough depending on where the market is. But the skills that we spent a lot of our early on time focused on were around working in an agile environment. So that, it's very important, not just that we can deliver value, but, if you want to get more investment, you need to be able to demonstrate that you can get value better, faster, cheaper, and that your own operating metrics are going up. We also took our teams through like consultative training. So a lot of the training that we give people in our organizations that have customer facing roles around consultative sales. So how do you persuade? How do you leverage your skills to be able to identify where value can be delivered, but also how you can bring your business partner along? So oddly enough, I don't want to undermine our analysts and our data people are going home every night and they're reading white papers, we're sending them to conferences, they're getting additional degrees. Every 2 weeks, we're highlighting a new area of analytic focus. But the thing that we really indexed on early was around the softer skills, and I think that paid a huge dividend in terms of business return and building trust with our business partners.
Yeah, great point. And Joe, I'd ask the same question to you from your perspective on evolution of skills and what best practices have you implemented to make sure that you're ready to tackle the challenges at hand, as well as those that we may not know are coming.
Right, and it goes back, and I hate to say I follow Todd again, but I'm going to speak right to his last point for sure, because that soft skill, by actually making sure the technologist or the business analyst or whatever you want to call them, the data manager is working with that business person, you want to make sure that customer service type atmosphere is there. It shouldn't be adversarial. It's very much so, they should work as a team, whether it's in an agile environment or a waterfall environment. But you have to have that service component. And that's one of the things I'm very big on, I can have the best technologists, but if they can't kind of see the vision and understand and then communicate in a very clear and succinct manner to be able to work with the business, then we're going to just kind of go round and round. And early on in my career, as a technologist, I saw the value of being able to get myself into the space of our business operations to be able to show my value and to show where, I could, relate to the business folks. And therefore, I saw how, I saw how some of my teammates who didn't do that, I saw how much they struggled. Then I saw how much I was able to kind of win my way into their space. So, and I've, ever since I've been in management, I've had a chance to, and I've been a strong advocate of, when I either hire through HR or when I'm bringing people from around the organization and letting them do tours through my team, is I tell folks, if you don't have a very strong customer service focus kind of coming to work for myself and my team, we're going to struggle a little bit, because that is where I put a huge emphasis. I can teach somebody the technology and we can go through that. And as much as technology is changing, where you might go out and hire somebody to be, in a certain space and have a certain skill set, yeah, they might have the baseline at that. But the way technology is changing so quickly, I mean, you have to constantly stay up on your skill set. So, but if you are pretty much, if you're a good communicator, if you can, solve business problems, if you're quick on your feet and can think, if you are just real solid and sound at a few things, I can teach you the ancillary, or the organization can teach you the ancillary things in order to kind of round your skill set out in order for you to be a great business partner, is what I call it, to be a great business partner with a technology flair.
Fantastic. I think one of the underlying themes that I've spoken to clients about across all markets is the new normal that we're all living with today, and certainly are going to have to address moving forward post-COVID-19. So Ursula, maybe a few comments from you on how your organization has pivoted to address and to frankly deal with what we're all dealing with COVID-19, and how are you preparing for what we expect to be the new norm, whatever that really means, and whenever that actually presents itself?
So from being a data analytics professional, I'll say the COVID, the pandemic, has really shined a light on data and analytics. Think about the statistics every day that are cited by people on the news, any of the reports you're reading, right? So for us, it has been great, because it's actually shining a light on a profession that I'm not sure got the same kind of attention pre-pandemic. So for us in the bank, we obviously had to focus quickly on the PPP, Main Street lending, stimulus checks, all those processes that are really important to our customers and how we were able to help. And so my team was able to jump in and provide some lift for our frontline individuals, a lot of different types of reporting that we literally built in a day for folks in order to get the level of information that they could then inform our customers who we were taking those PPP loans, where was it in the process, and then be able to share that back with those customers. So again, back on my outcome around customer experience, it actually helped us shine the light on our ability to help drive that so very quickly for us. And then as I think about post-pandemic, I'm not sure there is a post-pandemic, right? New normal is new normal. And for us, I think it's just going to drive the ability for us to keep helping the organization in new ways because new questions are being asked now as a result. And I think helping drive some of that need around the base data as well as the analytics that go off of it. So.
Yeah, I still have the cutout from the New York Times article somewhere in my office that stated that the data scientist was the sexiest job on the market, if you remember going back 4 or 5 years ago. But I think to your point, loud and clear, our businesses, our organizations couldn't operate today without our team's ability to deliver on analytics, which is all data driven. And now the ability to do that in an agile fashion to answer questions that, quite frankly, we weren't prepared or ever were thinking that we would need to answer. So now more than ever, it's critical that we have the right infrastructure and strategy in place so that way we can continue to adjust to whatever tomorrow's normal is, next year's normal is, and next decade's normal will be. So Sanjay, maybe I can ask the same question to you from a current and post COVID-19. What has this meant to you, and how have your teams adapted to adjust?
Yeah, so first of all, at a personal level, I'm really, as opposed to many other things I hear, we are really enjoying working from home because there is we work with global teams. So all of a sudden, there is nothing like a global team. Everybody is remote, equally remote. So it's just a matter of time differences and adjusting to those. So it has kind of leveled the playing field a bit in terms of our teams here and in India and in other places. But more at an enterprise level, I think Ursula talked about customer-related and product-related metrics and analytics, but there is a huge demand around internal metrics about where are the teams and how are they operating, how efficiently are they operating, are they at the same level of efficiency that they were at before pre-COVID, for example. And especially in distributed teams, it becomes the whole operation has to become more metrics driven as opposed to face-to-face discussions, meetings, manager-led assignments, etc. It has to be more metrics driven. So we see a lot of need to collect additional data around how our teams are operating around the world, what kind of productivity they have, and how that is being impacted or not being impacted, and being able to take effective measures around that. I also agree that this is a new normal. So we will be in this mode for the next 2+ years. We have to just adjust to this mode of operating, and an increased level of analytics, an increased level of data is only going to help organizations like ours become more efficient in this new way of operating.
I couldn't agree more, Sanjay. And you know what I love about these types of panel discussions is I always learn something new. I always validate that something that I have been doing, that I'm not a pioneer, and that there are others doing it. And ultimately, I always come away from these discussions with a short list of things that I'm going to do as soon as we leave here today and start to implement across my team. So I can't thank the four of you enough for taking time out of your busy days and your schedules and sharing with us your experience and expertise. And from my basement to yours, I look forward to doing the next conversation with you and hopefully meeting up with each of you in person soon. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I just wanted to add our thanks from Corinium to all the panelists, to Chris, Todd, Sanjay and Joe for such an engaging and informative and timely discussion as well. That's a topic around business value that always comes up in conversations that I have. So I'm sure the audience will have found that useful, and we can see that from the questions that were coming through that Chris put to the panel as well. So with that, everyone, we're going to draw day one to a close. Do join us again tomorrow at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern. For tomorrow's two sessions, we've got two presentations tomorrow, one from Broadridge and one from Renaissance Bank as well. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.